A pair of black shoes stopped at the edge of the open casket. The shoes were old. The leather was cracked across the toe, and the heel had been worn down on one side. A trembling hand reached out and rested on the lid. The hand belonged to a woman in a threadbare black dress, and the dress smelled of camphor and church candles. She did not weep. She breathed in once, steadied herself, and turned toward the man seated in the front row. He was the most feared man in 3 boroughs. He was burying his mother. The widow took one small step forward, and the entire room went still. 2 soldiers moved to block her. He raised a single finger, and the soldiers stopped. The widow's name was Rosa Greco. She had come to beg for her son's life. Why would she walk into the lion's den on the day his heart was already broken? Stay with me on this one. The funeral home sat on a quiet corner of Bensonhurst, between a bakery that had been there for 60 years and a flower shop that supplied half the weddings in the neighborhood. The sign above the door read Falcone and Sons, and the Falcone family had been burying Marchettis since before the Second War. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of lilies and old wood polish. The carpet was deep red and worn thin in a path down the center aisle. Black-suited men stood along the walls with their hands folded in front of them. Their eyes never stopped moving. They watched the door. They watched each other. They watched the man in the front row. Don Salvatore Marchetti was 63 years old. His hair was iron gray and combed straight back. His suit was charcoal black and tailored in Milan. His tie was a deep wine red that his mother had always said matched her favorite roses. He sat with his hands resting on his knees and his back as straight as a soldier on parade. He had not moved in almost an hour. He had not cried. He had not spoken. The men around him knew better than to speak first. Donna Lucia Marchetti had been 91 years old when she went to sleep in her own bed and did not wake up. She had outlived 2 husbands, 3 brothers, and 1 grown son she never spoke about. She had cooked Sunday gravy every week of her life for as long as anyone could remember. She had kept a rosary in her left hand and a wooden spoon in her right. She had loved her surviving son Salvatore with a fierce and quiet love, and she had been the only person in the world who could tell him no. Salvatore had carried her coffin himself, from the hearse to the wake room, with 3 of his oldest capos at the corners. He had set her down gently, the way you set down a sleeping child. He had kissed the cross on the lid. Then he had taken his seat, and he had not moved. The line of mourners had been long. Old neighbors, old enemies who had come to pay respect, because in this neighborhood you paid respect whether you liked the family or not. Priests, bakers, the man who ran the corner newsstand, 2 retired judges, a councilwoman who had not been invited but came anyway because she wanted the photograph. Each of them had stopped at the casket, bowed their head, then turned to Salvatore and offered the same small, careful words. He had nodded to each. He had said nothing. Now the line was almost gone. The room was almost empty. The big clock on the back wall ticked once, twice, 3 times into the silence. And then the door opened, and a small woman in a threadbare black dress walked in alone. She was 70 years old, and she walked with a slight tilt to her left, the way people walk when their hip has been giving them trouble for a long time, and they have learned to live with it. Her hair was white and pulled back into a tight knot at the base of her neck. Her face was deeply lined. Her eyes were the color of weak tea. She carried a small black handbag against her chest, the kind women her age had carried to Mass for 50 years, and her free hand was wrapped tight around something that the men along the wall could not yet see. She walked the length of the carpet slowly. She did not look at the men. She did not look at the flowers. She looked only at the woman in the casket. When she reached the open lid, she stopped, and she lowered her head, and her lips moved without sound for almost a full minute. Then she made the sign of the cross with a hand that was visibly shaking. She kissed her own fingers and laid them gently on Donna Lucia's folded hands. And then she turned toward Don Salvatore Marchetti. That was when the soldiers moved. Two of them stepped out from the wall at the same time. One was big and slow. The other was thin and very fast. The thin one was halfway to her before Salvatore lifted his hand. Just the index finger. Just an inch off his knee. Both soldiers stopped exactly where they were, as if a string had been cut. Salvatore did not look at his men. He looked at the widow. "Signora," he said. His voice was rough from a day of silence. "Come closer." Rosa Greco took 3 careful steps forward and stopped in front of him. She did not sit. There was no chair. She stood with her handbag pressed to her chest, and her free hand closed in a small white fist at her side. "Don Marchetti," she said. Her voice was thin, and it shook on the second word. "My name is Rosa. Rosa Greco. I am the widow of Aldo Greco, who used to keep the small grocery on Bay 23rd Street. He passed 9 years ago this June." Salvatore nodded once slowly. He remembered Aldo Greco. A small, gentle man who had always weighed your tomatoes with his thumb under the scale and always charged you less than he should have. "He was a good man," Salvatore said. "He was," Rosa said. Her eyes filled, but she did not let the tears fall. "Thank you for saying so. I would not be standing here if he were still alive. May God forgive me. He would have begged me not to come." The room had gone so quiet that the clock on the back wall sounded like a hammer. Every man along the wall had his hand near his jacket. Every man was watching Salvatore's face for the smallest sign. Nothing came. His face was a closed door. "Why are you here, Signora?" he said. It was not really a question. It was a door being opened a single inch. Rosa Greco pulled in a long, shaky breath. She looked down at her closed fist. She slowly opened it. In her palm lay a rosary. Old black wooden beads, worn smooth from 60 years of fingers, with a small silver cross at the end. She closed her hand around it again like she was afraid she might drop it, and she lifted her face, and she looked the Don of the Marchetti family straight in the eye. "I came," she said, "to beg you for my son's life." For a long second, nothing happened at all. The big slow soldier exhaled through his nose. The thin fast one shifted his weight. The capo on Salvatore's right, a square-built man named Vincenzo with a scar across his eyebrow, leaned forward an inch and his face went hard. Salvatore did not move. He did not blink. He looked at her like a man looking down a long dark hallway at something he could not quite see yet. "Tell me about your son," he said quietly. "His name is Marco," Rosa said. "He is 41 years old. He used to drive a delivery truck. Then he hurt his back. Then he could not pay the rent. Then he borrowed money he should not have borrowed. From people he should not have borrowed from. I told him no. I told him no, and he did it anyway, because that is what sons do when their mothers tell them no." Salvatore did not move. "He owes the family $73,000, Rosa said. "I know the number because I made him write it down. I have sold my husband's watch. I have sold the wedding ring. I have sold the small gold cross that I wore to my first communion. I have $9,400 in this handbag." She did not lift the bag. She did not gesture. She just said the number. "It is everything I have in the world. I am asking you, Don Marchetti, on the day of your mother's wake, to take it as a first payment. To give my son time. To not send the men who have been asking about him to my door again. He is the only thing I have left." She stopped. She did not cry. She had used up her crying somewhere in the long walk down 86th Street to this funeral home. She just stood there with the rosary closed in her fist and waited for the man in the wine-red tie to decide whether her son lived or died. Salvatore Marchetti did not answer for a long time. The clock ticked. Somewhere on the street outside, a bus went past with a long, tired sigh of brakes. A pigeon landed on the windowsill behind the casket and walked the length of it and flew away again. He was looking at her hand, at the rosary closed inside it. The black beads showed between her fingers. The small silver cross hung down past her thumb. There was a tiny chip on the lower arm of the cross, and the chip caught the light from the candles on the wall, and Salvatore Marchetti felt the floor of the funeral home tilt very slowly under his feet. "Signora Greco," he said. His voice was different now. Lower, almost a whisper. "May I see your rosary?" Rosa blinked. She had not expected the question. For a moment she did not move. Then she stepped forward and held out her open palm. The wooden beads lay across her dry skin like a small black river. Salvatore reached out. He did not take the rosary. He only lifted the silver cross with the tip of one finger and turned it gently so the candlelight ran along the edge of the chip. He looked at it for a long second. Then he laid it back down in her palm with the same care a man would use to lay an infant in its mother's arms. "Sit down, signora," he said. "I would rather stand, Don Marchetti." "Please," he said. "Sit down." Vincenzo, with the scar, moved a chair forward without being asked. Rosa Greco sat. Her knees gave a small thank you when they bent. She kept the rosary in her hand. She kept the handbag in her lap. She looked at the Don and she waited. For one strange moment, the world seemed to go quiet and ordinary. Salvatore stood up. He walked, slow and stiff, to the small side table where a pitcher of water and a tray of glasses had been set out for the mourners. He poured a single glass of water. He carried it back. He held it out to Rosa Greco, with both hands the way a son might hold something out to his mother. She took it. She drank a small, careful sip. He returned to his seat. He folded his hands on his knee. He looked for that one short moment, like a tired older man in a nice suit at his mother's wake, and nothing more. Then he turned his head 1/4 of an inch toward Vincenzo, and he said in a voice no louder than a breath, "Send for Carmine." Right now. The room turned to stone. The widow Greco was a strong woman in many small, quiet ways, but she did not understand what had just happened. She only understood that the Don's eyes had gone somewhere far away, and that his hand on his knee had closed into a fist, and that the man with the scar had walked out of the room as fast as a man can walk without running. She gripped the rosary tighter. She gripped the handbag tighter. She tried to remember the words of the prayer her mother had taught her when she was a frightened girl during the war, and she found she could not remember them, and that frightened her more than anything else. If you have ever sat across from someone whose face you cannot read, you know that small, cold feeling. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. The thing Salvatore Marchetti had not yet said out loud, the thing that had tilted the floor under him when he lifted that silver cross, was this. He knew the rosary in Rosa Greco's hand. He had known it the moment he saw the chipped cross. It was his mother's. Or it had been his mother's, a very long time ago. He was a boy of 33 then. He had not yet been a Don. He had been the only son of a powerful man, and he had been trying very hard to be something other than what he was born to be. He had made a mistake on a winter night that had nearly cost him his life. He had been bleeding in an alley behind a small grocery store on Bay 23rd Street. He had been bleeding badly. The owner of the store had come out the back door with a sack of trash and had seen him, and instead of going back inside and locking the door the way any sensible man would have done, the small, gentle grocer had knelt down next to him and said, "Son, can you stand up if I help you?" and his wife had come out behind him with a clean towel from the kitchen and pressed it to the wound, and the two of them had walked him through the back of the store and into their tiny apartment above, and they had called a doctor they trusted, and they had not called the police, and they had not called his father, and they had not asked his name. The grocer's wife had sat next to him on a narrow bed for 3 days while he slept and bled and slept again, and she had prayed over him with a rosary of old black beads and a small silver cross. And on the fourth morning, when he was strong enough to walk down their stairs and leave, she had pressed the rosary into his hand. "For your mother," she had said. Tell her a stranger's mother prayed for her son. He had walked home through the snow with the rosary in his pocket. He had not told his father. He had told only his mother. He had laid the beads on her kitchen table, and he had told her the whole story, the part about the alley and the bleeding, and the small, gentle grocer, and the wife with the kind hands and the old black rosary. Donna Lucia had wept the way she almost never wept, and she had picked up the rosary and held it to her lips for a long time, and then she had said, "Salvator, listen to me now. You will never tell anyone outside this kitchen who those people are. They saved my son. You will never let any harm come to them. And when I die, if I am still in time to ask anything of you, this is what I will ask. Repay every kindness Rosa Greco ever showed me. Every single kindness, do you understand?" He had been very young. He had said yes. He had meant it. He had pushed it down inside himself the way he pushed everything down, and the years had piled up on top of it like snow on a buried road. Now he was sitting in his mother's wake, and the woman with the rosary was sitting in front of him, and the door at the back of the room was opening, and Vincenz, with the scar, was coming back in with another man, a short, heavy man named Carmen, who carried a thin black leather folder under his arm. Carmen ran the books. Carmen knew every dollar the family was owed, and every name attached to every dollar. Carmen had been hunting a federal informant inside their operation for almost 5 months. The informant had passed 2 sealed conversations to a federal agent at a diner in Sheepshead Bay. The informant had a debt of $73,000. The informant's name in the family's private ledger had 3 question marks beside it, because nobody had quite been able to pin him down. Carmen stopped beside Salvator's chair. He bent down, the way you bend down to whisper to a sick man. He said one word, very quietly, into Salvator's ear. He said the name Marco Greco. Then he straightened up and waited. Salvator Marchetti closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. Behind his eyelids, he saw his mother on a snowy morning in 1995, picking up a rosary with a chipped silver cross and pressing it to her lips. He saw himself bleeding in an alley behind a small grocery. He saw a kind woman pressing a clean towel against his side. He heard his mother's voice. "Repay every kindness Rosa Greco ever showed me. Every single kindness, do you understand?" He opened his eyes. He looked at Rosa Greco, sitting in front of him in her threadbare black dress, with her son's life closed inside her fist along with his mother's beads. He smiled. It was a very small smile. It did not reach his eyes, because his eyes were full of something old and tired and almost holy. But it was a smile. "Signora Greco," he said, "will you please give me a moment to speak with my men?" "Of course, Don Marchetti," she said. He stood up. He walked slow and steady to the back of the room. He motioned to Vincenz and to Carmen and to 2 other capos along the wall. They followed him through a side door into a small office with a desk and a green-shaded lamp, and a framed photograph of his father shaking hands with a long-dead mayor. He closed the door behind them. He stood with his back to the door, and he looked at his 4 most trusted men, and he spoke very quietly. "The debt of Marco Greco is paid in full as of this minute," he said. "Out of my own pocket. Carmen, you will write the receipt tonight, and you will deliver it to me before morning." Carmen opened his mouth. Carmen closed his mouth. Carmen wrote nothing down because Carmen knew better than to write something like that down in front of the man giving the order. He simply nodded. "The hunt," Salvador said. "The thing that has been keeping us awake for 5 months. The name in our books with 3 question marks beside it. That hunt is over. As of right now. Tonight. Forever. No one looks for him. No one drives past his apartment. No one asks his neighbors questions. No one even says his name in a room with our people in it. If I hear that name spoken once after tonight in connection with our business, the man who spoke it answers to me. Personally. Am I understood?" Vincenzo's scar was very pale. He had been the one hunting. He had been close. He had been very close. He breathed out through his nose and he said, "See, Don Marchetti. I want every man who has been working that file to be told tonight," Salvador said. Quietly, one at a time. "There is no name. There is no debt. There is no problem. There never was. Whatever they saw, they did not see. Whatever they heard, they did not hear. Do you understand? See, Don, this is my mother's last request to me," Salvador said. His voice did not shake, but the men in the room understood for the first time that night that the Don was speaking as a son and not as a boss, and they lowered their eyes. "She asked it of me a long time ago. She asked it again tonight, through that small woman out there, and through a chipped silver cross she gave to a stranger 30 years ago. If any of you ever, in any way, by any action, breaks the promise I am making in this room, you are not breaking it to me. You are breaking it to her. May God help the man who does that. I will not be able to." No one spoke. No one moved. Salvador Marchetti turned, opened the door and walked back out into the wake room. He sat down across from Rosa Greco. He took a long breath. He reached into the inside pocket of his charcoal black suit jacket and brought out a thick white envelope sealed with a small spot of red wax. He had been carrying it all day. It had been meant for the church, for a stone bench in his mother's name in the side garden. The church already had enough stone benches. His mother would understand. He laid the envelope across Rosa Greco's hands, on top of her handbag, on top of the rosary, like a priest laying a stole across a praying woman's shoulders. "Signora Greco," he said, "your son owes this family nothing. Not 73,000. Not 73. Not 7. Nothing. The debt is gone. I have paid it personally, and the books will show it gone before morning. No one will come to your door again. No one will speak his name. No one will follow him. I give you my word as the son of Lucia Marchetti, and you will find in this neighborhood that my word, whatever else may be said about it, has never been broken." Rosa Greco stared at him. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. "In this envelope," Salvador said quietly, "is a little more than $30,000. It is not a loan. It is not a debt. It is a gift from a stranger's son to a kind woman's mother, very late and not enough. There will not be questions. There will not be visits. You will take it home. You will put it somewhere safe. You will use it for your son's back, and for your hip, and for whatever else a long life still asks of you. Do you understand me, Signora?" Rosa Greco's hand opened. The rosary lay across her dry palm. The chipped silver cross caught the candlelight one more time. She looked at the beads. She looked at the envelope. She looked at the Don of the Marchetti family. "Don Salvador," she whispered, "I do not understand. I came to beg. I came with $9,000 and the prayer of a foolish old woman." "You came," Salvador said, "with a debt my mother asked me to repay 30 years ago. You did not know it. I almost did not remember it. She remembered for both of us. He gently lifted the rosary from her palm. He held it in both his hands for a long moment. He looked at the chipped cross. He kissed it once, the way his own mother had kissed it that snowy morning in 1995. Then he laid the rosary back into Rosa Greco's palm and closed her fingers around it. "Keep it, Signora," he said. "It came home to you tonight. May it never leave your hand again." Rosa Greco put her face in her hands and she finally, quietly, wept. The first hour after a great mercy is a strange hour. You walk out of a room expecting the world to look different, and the world looks exactly the same. The bakery on the corner is still putting the last loaves in the window. The bus is still grinding up 86th Street. A man is still arguing with his wife in Italian outside the flower shop about whether they need more carnations or fewer. Rosa Greco walked home that night holding her small black handbag against her chest with both hands. The envelope was inside. She did not stop to look at it. She did not stop at all. She walked the 11 blocks back to her small apartment above the closed dry cleaner, and she let herself in, and she sat down at the kitchen table without taking off her coat, and she laid the envelope and the rosary side by side on the worn oilcloth, and she stared at them for almost an hour. Then she made the sign of the cross. She picked up the rosary. She prayed every prayer she knew. She prayed for Donna Lucia Marchetti, who had died in her own bed at 91 years old, who had loved her son with a fierce and quiet love, who had remembered a kindness for 30 years and had reached out across her own death to repay it. She prayed for her own husband Aldo, the small, gentle grocer, who had once knelt down in a snowy alley behind his store and asked a bleeding stranger if he could stand up. She prayed for her son Marco, who would never know the whole truth of what had happened in that funeral home tonight, and who did not need to know. Then she put the envelope in the bottom of her dresser drawer, under the folded slips and the lavender sachet her sister had sent from Calabria, and she went to bed. Marco Greco came by the next afternoon, the way he had come by every Saturday afternoon for the last 3 years, with 2 small bags of groceries from the market down the street. His back was bothering him. His face was tired. He set the bags on the counter and he said, "Ma, you look different today. Did you sleep?" "I slept very well, Marco." "Anybody come around? Anybody call?" "No, Marco. Nobody came. Nobody called." He looked at her for a long second. He had been a hunted man for so long that his shoulders had started to live up around his ears, and even his mother had not been able to fix the way he carried himself. Something in her face that afternoon made his shoulders come down half an inch. He did not know why. He would not know why for the rest of his life. But he ate the sandwich she made him, and he sat by her window with a cup of weak coffee, and he watched the pigeons on the fire escape. And for the first time in 5 months, he did not flinch when a car door slammed in the street below. The hunt was over. He would never know it had begun. Don Salvatore Marchetti went home that night to house too large and too quiet. He took off his wine-red tie and folded it carefully on his mother's old dresser. He sat down on the edge of his bed. He took out a small wooden box he had kept in his closet for 30 years. He opened it. Inside was a folded handkerchief stained with old brown blood, and underneath the handkerchief was a small piece of yellow paper with a name and an address written on it in his mother's careful hand. The name was Rosa Greco. The address was an apartment above a grocery store on Bay 23rd Street. He held the piece of paper in his hand for a long time. Then he kissed it the way he had kissed the chipped silver cross, and he laid it gently back into the box, and he closed the lid, and he put the box away. He walked down to his kitchen. He turned on a single small lamp over the stove. He did not turn on the big light. He found a pot in the cupboard. He filled it with water. He set it on the burner. He took down the wooden spoon his mother had used every Sunday of her life, and he laid it on the counter next to the pot, and he stood there with his hand resting on the handle of that spoon for a long, quiet minute. Then he began, slowly and clumsily, the way a son who has not cooked in 40 years begins, to make a small pot of his mother's Sunday gravy. He did not need it. He would not eat much of it. He made it anyway because the house was too quiet, and because somewhere in Bensonhurst a frail widow was finally sleeping, and because a long-ago promise made in a warm kitchen by a young man to his mother had, at last on the day of her wake, been kept in full. The big clock in the hallway struck 11. The pot began to simmer. Don Salvator Marchetti, the most feared man in 3 boroughs, stood in his mother's kitchen in his shirt-sleeves and stirred the gravy with her wooden spoon, and for the first time since the morning she did not wake up, he allowed himself, very quietly, to cry.